Welcome to the process improvement journey. Who are Labria? Labria are an independent consultancy that provide process mapping services, training and facilitated workshops. We have clients ranging from defence, manufacturing, education, IT and software vendors, as well as small local businesses. The agenda. What is process improvement? A Miggins and Miggins case study, an exercise on what should be the focus of our improvement activity, defect identification and why it's important, selecting a place to start, looking for patterns and trends, identifying the value in a process and process cycle efficiency, the to-be model and validating the improvement, along with what did we learn and the next steps. What is process improvement? Process improvement can be defined as the increase in effectiveness of a defined process. Before you can start on any improvement journey, you must understand where you are now. This is called the as-is state, and the possible scenario you wish to move towards is defined as to be. There may be various iterations of to be before a final version is agreed upon. This is not change management. Process improvement is not to be confused with change management, which links strategy and execution. Change management will naturally follow on from process improvement as a mechanism to realize identified improvement in the workplace. Heraclitus, a Greek philosopher, is quoted as saying, "Change is the only constant in life." To support the workshops of practical process mapping and the process improvement journey, Labria have developed a case study called Miggins and Miggins, which we're using for our statistics and data. If you'd like to view the full case study, you can look at it at our website, labria.co.uk/training-materials/Miggins. Miggins and Miggins case study. Process improvement is challenging to explore without a data set to work with. Labria have developed a case study that is typical of small businesses that have grown over the years with all the triumphs and challenges that business presents. For this exercise, we'll be focusing on the sales team and what can be done to remove the blockers from growth. Company background. Founded in 2004, Miggins and Miggins are a professional services consultancy which conduct on-site inspections and provide clients with a report of their findings. The company was a brainchild of David Miggins, who started it with his wife Sarah. In the early years, Sarah took care of the administration, sales and back office functions, and David took care of all the on-site work. The company have grown organically over the years and has a whatever it takes to get the job done approach, but sales have been growing steadily but recently have plateaued and there's been a reduction in repeat business. Additional sales information. The core purpose of the function is to process new business, add it to the system, and pass all the required information to the consultants that will deliver the work. Sales orders are received via the online portal, telephone sales, and hard copy and emailed orders. There is some written documentation in the department, and there is friction with the sales team from most other functions, especially finance, with repeated requests to find a salesperson who put the order on the system to clarify the details of the sale and the recharging of expenses. As a function, sales has a high turnover of staff. Some investigation work has been done to find out why this is, but has been inconclusive. But anecdotal feedback has been that staff are not sure what they're responsible for and who is doing it and when. Over and above the written documentation, there was an interview conducted with the sales representative about how they perform their role. These are the interview notes. I know that the sales order form MM1072 is used for online orders, and there is another version that's used when taking the order over a phone, but nearly all of the sales team don't think it's necessary and make manual notes and enter it into the system. I don't know that there was another form and why it's different or what it's for. I keep my own list of people who don't pay expenses. I'm aware of the guidance notes, but it hasn't been updated in ages and some are no longer customers. We tend to book the order and argue about the visit dates later. Some of us offer dates to customers and put it on the order but don't check the calendar first or put it as a date on hold. We find the sales procedure confusing as it doesn't tell you which order to do things in. Doing the credit check sometimes takes too long, so most of us put the order on the system anyway without waiting for a credit score. They didn't define how long was too long. I've had no formal training for the sales process. What should the improvement focus be? Based on the background information we've been provided, where should we start? Should we implement a new IT system, scrap the sales process and start again, retrain the sales team, bring in a new sales manager, or follow the process and identify the issues? Even when you have an as-is process mapped, you can't begin to improve the process until you understand the data. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to process improvement. Defect identification. So, what is a defect? Well, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, it is defined as a fault in something or in the way it's been made that means it's not perfect. This statement is factually true. However, when we think of a defect in a process context, the lean principles define it as a process output, product, or service that does not meet the customer requirements. This statement is factually true. However, when we think of a defect in a process context, the lean principles define it as a process output, product, or service that does not meet the customer requirements. Defects, simply put. When thinking of process outputs, a defect is in simple terms the incompletion of the task. For example, if it's a requirement to complete a form which has 12 mandatory fields and only 10 are completed, the output is defective. Depending on what you're measuring and why, this may be regarded as two defects in one form or a single defect as the form is incomplete. Where to start? In the sales background information, it's been identified that There is friction with the sales team and most other functions, especially finance, with repeated requests to find the salesperson who put the order on the system to clarify the details of the sale and the recharging of expenses. The analysis starts from one place and one place only: the data. You cannot audit activities of the process, but you can identify and measure the outputs. Getting a repeatable sample size will give you a good benchmark. After a workshop, the current state or as-is process has been defined and agreed, and it starts with telephone orders, hard copy orders and emailed orders coming in, and the first activity is to ensure that terms and conditions are held on file. We then end up with signed terms and conditions, and then ask the question is there a credit check required? If there's not a credit check required, we can just go forward to the next stage. If there is a credit check that's required, we request a credit check from finance, which will give us back an acceptable credit score. We can then look to transcribe the order details onto the customer order form MM1072. If online portal orders come through, they also get entered at this point. This then gives us a completed sales form, and then we can look to calculate the consultant expenses, which will give an expenses estimate, and the sales executive will then check the consultant's diary and provide details to the customer. It will give the customer a list of available dates, and then they identify the details to add to the sales order, which will give them the order number, the site address, the contact name, the requested date, which then gets finalized and they enter the order on the system and place it in status SOR, which gives them an order at status SOR, which goes through into the operations team. Following on from the process being agreed, or the as-is process being agreed, we then looked to identify defects, and the signed terms and conditions 46 per 100 are not on file. When a credit check is required, we're finding that 80 out of 100 that require a credit check, the credit check or the credit score is not being obtained from finance. There are 95 errors per 100 when they're transcribing the details from the paper-based forms or the online portal forms onto the completed sales order form, and that could be very minor, it could be major, but there's details in translation which are being missed. They then calculate the consultant expenses, and expenses are seen to be a major issue in some way, shape or form, with 90 out of every 100 having some kind of issue on it. The dates then, which are offered back to the customer, there's always some kind of problem there by the look of it, because 70 out of 100 have issues. And then when they identify the details to add to the sales order, then the majority of the time the order number is correct, so there's only 2 errors per 100. The site address seems to be an issue with 40 per 100. The contact name is generally there, but 7 per 100. And the requested date, that seems to be a smaller issue, but again with 30 per 100 having an error. Right at the end of the process, it seems that the order is not always being placed in the correct status of SOR, with 5 out of every 100 having an issue. Possible lien wastes. Whilst this workshop is not designed to cover lien specifically, I have used lean principles to identify potential target areas for the activities and where we should potentially focus our efforts. Classically, lean had 7 wastes. However, I am including an 8th waste, which is now starting to become more commonly accepted, and that is to do with skills, or some people call it talent. So looking at the first activity then, ensuring the terms and conditions are held on file. There's certainly a delay that's involved in that due to the fact that we have to wait for the customer to sign them. Talent, questioning or a query on that against the credit check is, could the sales executive do the credit check themselves? That's something to check to see if we can utilize that better. Waiting time is against requesting the credit check from finance. Whilst it may not take long to do, there could well be a long delay for finance to do it. Over processing. So if we think about over processing, is if we're doing an action which we don't need to do and transcribing the order details from the customer order form onto MM1072 is a prime example of over processing, because we're actually going to do the same task later on to enter that same information somewhere else, so it could well be redundant. Looking at calculating the consultant expenses, if we don't do it right, or if we're not using the right form or the right guidance, or we have the right list of people to charge expenses to, we can end up with a defect. Checking the consultant's diary. If that diary is not being kept up to date and we have to speak to the consultant, then that could result in a delay in being able to process. And providing the details to the customer. While it's been identified as over processing, this has a bearing on the next stage of the process within the operations team, where the operations team are asking the same questions all over again that sales have already asked, and potentially we might be able to remove some of the questions that the customer is being asked for along the way. Identifying the details to add to the sales order is certainly open to defects if we don't have the right information. And over processing is placing that order at SOR. Why can't we just build it as we go and finally complete it with a tick box? It's good to get a measure of how long things take. We're using 2 fields here. So we're talking about effort, which is the actual physical task of doing the work, and the wait time, which is waiting for a result to come back from the customer or from the stakeholder. And then we get a total time. So each of the activities has got a time that's associated with it. Looking at defects and the as-is defects per 100, we can see from the process maps we've transcribed this into a table, which we can then start turning into Excel charts. And we can see that there are a number of defects. Some of them are quite high. But presenting this information to a stakeholder or management, it is not easy to digest knowing where to start. Taking that as-is data and placing it in a Pareto chart, we can start to focus our mind as to where our major issues are, and would typically look at the top 3 issues as giving the most gain for our effort. So the top 3 greatest returns. So looking at that Pareto chart we've just seen, we can see that the highest rate of defects are against the completed sales order form, the expenses estimate, and the fact that there's no credit score. These are now targets for a process improvement activity. So are there any patterns to the defects? One thing you'll pick up when you're doing a process improvement project is some of the anecdotal evidence, and in this case our business analyst has heard that some days are worse for defects than others. And so over a 4-week period, the defects have been recorded and the day of the week has also been recorded to see if there's any kind of attribution between the two. Again, the data is not particularly accessible in a table format, but I can see a large number repeating through. Turning that data of days of the week into a timeline, we can start to see some peaks and troughs appearing. And it seems to be quite interesting that there are certain days of the week, which are Wednesdays, where the defect rate seems to be hitting a peak. So what are the peaks? There appears to be in the pattern to Wednesdays as to where defects are highest, and our business analyst is going to need to do some further investigation to see why it's different on that particular day. Process cycle efficiency. What is it? To understand process cycle efficiency, you need to understand these key factors: effort, wait time, cycle time, and value add. The effort, as the name suggests, is the time taken to do the task physically, while the wait time is the time that's elapsed before effort can begin again, such as waiting for a customer to sign or for an approver to sign off. These two values added together give the cycle time. The value add is the activity of creating something that customers will pay money for, such as a record of their order. This customer may be internal or external. Calculating the PCE. In an ideal world, all the activities we would do should be value adding to our outputs. For reasons of business operations and statutory requirements, there are often requirements for tasks that are necessary but do not add value to the customer. We call these necessary non-value adding. Their activities, such as those that require rework, are wasteful, and we describe those as non-value add, and they should look to be eliminated. To calculate the PCE, a simple formula of value adding time divided by the cycle time will give the PCE. A score above 25 is deemed good. So calculating the efficiency score. So the activities have all had their effort collected in minutes, and the wait time has also been collected. Using a formula, the cycle time has then been calculated, and the value state has been identified against each activity. Whilst there is only one non-value add activity, there are 4 necessary non-value add and only 4 value adding activities. This gives us a process cycle efficiency score of 3.1. What are the recommendations? The analysis has identified the following. There's an immediate need for refresher training for all staff. Defects increase on a Wednesday when there is no management in the office. Cover should be arranged in the short term. The offline sales form is redundant, and data should be entered directly into the sales order system. Simple customization should be conducted on the sales order system to prevent mandatory fields from being missed. The process should be restructured to enter the order first. As there are so many issues with sales not booking consultants correctly, a requested date should be set, and the activity of allocating the consultant should now pass to the operations team. Process redesign. The process has now been restructured with the same start and end points, however the order of the activities has now changed and some of the activities have been removed. The process now starts with telephone orders, hard copy orders, online portal orders and emailed orders getting entered into the system. With the changes that have been put into place, the mandatory information cannot be skipped, and so now we have contact names entered, site addresses, order numbers and a requested date. We still now need to ensure that terms and conditions are held on file, which gives us those signed copies of terms and conditions, and then we look to conduct a credit check. Now the credit check is still conducted by finance at the moment, but some of the waiting time has been reduced as the sales team will phone the finance team to tell them they've sent one over. They then calculate the consultant's expenses, which gives us an expenses estimate, and the biggest change here is we notify the customer of order acceptance and that operations will contact them to arrange a visit date. So that order is now ready to release, and that order can be set to state as SOR, sales order released, for operations to pick up. With the new mandatory fields in place and the changes to the system along with retraining, the defects have reduced dramatically. Whilst we can still see using the Pareto chart that there are problems with the expenses estimates, the rest of the curve has actually flattened out pretty well, and a further improvement exercise may well be required to look at these expenses issues. If we look at the new 4-week period to see if we have issues, we can identify the number of defects are actually all single figures, and there are no obvious areas where certain days are higher than others. If we look at the defects by day from the data as a timeline, we can see it looks much more randomized and there are no steady peaks of certain days of the week. Looking at the process cycle efficiency for the 2B, there's not a significant change to the PCE number. It was 3.1 before, it's 3.19 now, but we have seen that the wait time has reduced significantly by over 150 minutes, and the cycle time has also come down. And the effort is actually much quicker to get the job out of the door. Assuming now that the 2B has been implemented and it's become business as usual, we need to see if our change has been effective. And we do that by rerunning the same 4-week assessment and looking at the number of defects from before the defect or before the improvement to after. Looking at the defect analysis chart, we can quite clearly see that we flattened out those spikes of the defects during the week, and while we are still experiencing defects, they seem to be on a much more level playing field than previously, and we can go through another process improvement cycle if we want to reduce those further. We can now say that the improvement activity has been effective. So what have we learned from the process improvement exercise we've just run? There's no one-size-fits-all for process improvement. So you must define a clear as-is process or series of processes, define what problem you're trying to solve, whether that's cost reduction, defect reduction, time reduction, or an increase in customer satisfaction, and have a clear set of data. Without data, you cannot say if improvement activity has made things better or it's just changed or different. Support from Labria. Labria are offering a free 1-hour consultation to discuss your processes. This could be from where to start your process improvement journey to you don't have any processes and need to know where to start. We can help kickstart your process discovery so we can map a basic process and give you a framework to attach these data elements to start the improvement cycle. Or build up your collection and create an end-to-end process and the interconnectivity between those processes where we can start looking at defects in more detail across a wider set. The sources of further information then. So to contact us, you can contact victoria.hormigo@labria.co.uk, paul.elson-vining@labria.co.uk, or telephone us on +44 118 38 00 856, or visit our website of www.labria.co.uk. Take a look at our programme of events at www.labria.co.uk/events. Labria want to ensure that the materials that we create are useful to the audience they are created for. We would deeply appreciate if you could fill in this 2-minute survey. It's only 10 questions, so we can continue to provide high quality content. Please complete our feedback form at www.labria.co.uk/feedback. Thank you for your time.